everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. Happy Monday or happy very early Tuesday if you are watching us or listening to us from the future. My name is Minola Jacques, and I will be your co host for the next hour as we will delve into time mastery. If there's such a thing as a great topic for a Monday, time mastery is definitely my top choice. And this is part of our March series. We will be having an amazing lineup of speakers, and I will ask Jessa, who takes care of us backstage, to help me bring them live. And as they will get used to seeing each other in their boxes, I will just continue to welcome everybody in the audience. I do see a few comments coming in, so that's great. At least the technology is working. Half of our work is already done. So please do let us know where you're connecting from and help us travel vicariously through your comments. And also, I will just wholeheartedly encourage everybody in the audience today to consider this conversation just as much theirs as it is our speakers. So whatever it is that we will bring up in our panel conversation, do drop us your ideas, your own take on the topic, and help this community grow and learn from each other. Now, I do say that hacking HR hours always feel shorter than regular hours, so let's make the most out of our time here today. And what we will do, I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise. And I will ask you first, just shortly introduce yourselves. And also, when you hear time mastery, what is the first word that comes into your mind? And Lucy, it's great to share a conversation with you again. Welcome.
Hi, Manola. Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. My name is Lucy Georgiadis. Hi, everyone. I can already see people coming in from Kenya and all over the world. Really amazing, Venezuela. So my background is in cognitive neuropharmacology, vision and brain development. I am the CEO and founder of Elevate Leadership. We do one-on-one coaching, we do live workshops, and we do micro-learning on-demand platforms for manager training. So I've done many, many thousands of hours of coaching and training over the last 13 years. So I'm really delighted to be here today and share some helpful hints where I can be handy with this. Time management is obviously something that comes up a huge amount with our clients, and I'm regularly coaching folks on it. So looking forward to all of your questions. I think the one word that comes up to me when I think of time mastery is going first is always the hard one where I have to come in with one. I'd say that it's like it's maybe two words: operationalizing it. And I'll say that mainly because sometimes it's not the techniques that need to be advanced, it's the processes that you put in place to operationalize those somewhat relatively simple things, so that we really stick to those time mastery techniques that we want to.
Thank you so very much, Lucy. Dave, so good to have you in this conversation.
Hey, everybody. I am Dave Greenwood. I am the author of two books. One is Overcoming Distractions, which is a massive time suck. And the other one, my most recent book, is Overcoming Burnout. I work with, I would say I work on a more mentorship level with individuals with adult ADHD that are busy professionals, high achievers, everything from PhD level all the way down to the solopreneur. And then I'm offering corporate workshops on burnout as well to help people understand the complexity of burnout in the workplace and all the factors that come into play with that. So, and time management is obviously one of them. So I think what the first word that comes to mind when I think about time mastery is energy. Because time is irrelevant without the energy to maximize that time.
Thank you so very much, Dave. Jason, good to see you.
Hey, Manola. Hey, fellow panelists. Thanks for having me today. And Jason Rissoli from New Jersey, USA. And love, as always, people all over the world joining. Been in HR and people operations and labor relations for well over 20 years and have operated at all different levels of organizations, both startups, Fortune 500s and such. Currently still looking for a new role. But what does time mastery mean to me in in one word, it's prioritization. It's really just preparation, prioritization. Sure, I'll bring up my 5 Ps at some point today, but that's what it is in short.
Thank you so very much, Sudhir. It's good to have you on this panel. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Minola, and lovely panelists and wonderful participants. My name is Sudhir Singh. I am joining from San Francisco Bay Area. I am an industrial engineer, so spent my early years doing time and motion studies. So I have very special connection with time. For last 20 years, I have been leading the HR function for various multinational organizations. And recently I started ProOgs, which is really focused on synergizing culture, people, and business strategies.
And when you think about time mastery, Sudhir, what is the first word that comes to mind?
Oh, yeah. Complex. Complex is the word, because time is such a thing that like even Einstein had to struggle to figure it out.
Thank you so very much. And now that you mention Einstein, there's a quote that is attributed to him. Some people debate whether it was him actually saying it, but he said that space exists so that not everything happens to you, and time exists so that not everything happens all at once. Now, as we ease into the topic, I will just need a bit of help with logistics. I don't know if it's my connection, but what would really help me and keep us all safe from echo is that when you're not contributing as panelists, if you can stay on mute, and that will help a lot with the audio experience. Now, one of the things that was mentioned, we had a panel that adjacently also touched on time mastery and prioritization. And we talked a lot about, is it really time management or is it also energy management, especially with teams across multiple time zones, with remote teams, with so many other complex challenges. And Dave, since you brought the energy into the conversation, I would ask you to be the pioneer for this one. And then all of you, you know the drill. The unmuting competition will be officially open, and just build your conversation on the go. So Dave, where are we on the time management and energy management conversation?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. And because I work with busy professionals with ADHD, energy is one of the top concerns. And I think we got to look at time management as a very individual thing. Especially for, and again, I'll just say, just because of the people I work with ADHD and even burned out, where some people may work really well in the morning because they have that energy. Maybe they got a good night's sleep. Maybe they hit the gym real quick. They had breakfast. Some people may be night owls, or maybe they work better in the afternoon. And I think we need to take that into consideration. Because, one of the comments I get from people I work with is that when I work in the morning, 4 hours of work takes me 2 hours. When I work in the afternoon, 2 hours of work takes me 7 hours. So I think we really need to take that into consideration, obviously with, the constraints and the logistics of the workplace. But I think the freedom to allow team members to be able to do certain types of work when they have the most energy, I think is critically important.
Yeah, agreed. I like David. That's getting the right time of day in mind. I think when you're thinking of the different tasks you want to do is huge. And I think also what I find with my clients, helping them a lot with energy management, is obviously there are some tasks that drain us and there are some tasks that give us a lot of energy, and that's going to differ from person to person too. And it's not necessarily the ones that you like the best that give you energy, but often it is. And so also when you're thinking about, I suppose, looking at your calendar and working out, how do I really want to make sure that I'm optimizing my energy throughout the day? Whilst we're looking at the time of day, it's also the type of task that you're deciding to put when. And those ones which require that concentration, or maybe the ones that you like the best, can go a little later in the day if you find you don't need quite as much energy for those. And just space them out in a way that makes sense for how you how much energy or joy those tasks really give you.
Fantastic. And one thing I would mention is, time is one of the very, very few things that every human being on this entire planet share. We're all graced with the same 24 hours a day. And when you look at the energy and how you use that time, whether it's mastering it from a time management perspective, using it to make fulfillment within your life, or using it to, share experiences and productivity, it's something that we all have in common. So energy, along with that amount of time, is something, like Dave said, it's coexistent and it's existential.
Yeah, well said, Jason. And Lucy and Dave covered two very important dimensions of energy in relationship with time, which are, of course, the time of the day and the task you are doing. I think I'll bring in the third dimension, which is around your mindset and your frame of mind. Like, time really moves slow when you are stressed out, depressed, and so on, right? And it goes fast when you are joyful, and so on. So I think a combination of these three things would essentially determine in terms of how time moves for you. And that, while Jason said that everybody has 24 hours, which is true from a clock perspective, but those 24 hours look very different for each individual. So there are like 7 billion permutations and combinations of time every second.
I really love this highly individual lens to time mastery. But I was listening to what you all shared, and a question popped up, and I can't hold it back. So I hope you will indulge a somewhat personal curiosity. Is there a specific, for lack of a better word, HR flavor to time mastery? Because through a lot of conversation, we talked about how HR as a function is quite a specific function inside an organization, in the middle of everything, streamlining and centralizing so many different expectations, navigating so many different assumptions, having to synchronize across so many different agendas. And I'm wondering, is there a particular HR challenge or HR opportunity when it comes to time mastery? And Jason, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think it's one of the challenges that are brought to HR's attention the most is, productivity and performance of individuals within the workplace, and whether or not they're utilizing the most their time management in a way that's highly effective. So I do see that as a common issue that comes with those that are struggling from a performance standpoint. So it's one of those things from a learning and development standpoint we're bringing forth to help teach either individuals that are struggling or people managers on how to coach and mentor those that are struggling with time management. So again, whether it's goal setting, whether it's batching and utilizing your time to be more effective, or prioritization issues, there's lots of different techniques. There's also obviously famous books that have been written around this, and training techniques. Covey in particular has been obviously one of the most well-known ever when it comes to around time management. But again, I think it also goes back to what we've been talking about before, is someone's energy and culture and thrive that has to be taken into account as well. So it's not just the things that they can learn, but also their desires around these things that they're learning to be more effective. So
I think for HR specifically, in terms of their own time management, I think a skill that would transcend most HR folks that I work with is being able to set really great boundaries for themselves, because it is really hard. And someone mentioned in the comments section here about delegating and the dimension of that. And if there's no one to delegate to, it like lands on that individual, which it does. And therefore, like the ability to set boundaries, saying no in ways that resonate and that feel good to you. And there's lots of other ways that we can talk about when it comes to boundary setting. But I do think that's something that HR folks, that every HR manager probably that's listening in today would feel is something that they have to practice day in, day out.
I come from the individual level, so I've never spent any time as an HR professional, but I can tell you that through the the dozens and dozens of people that I've worked with one-on-one, not one of them has ever mentioned that they got any type of resources from their organization in terms of how to manage their time. Maybe it's just the people I'm working with, but they were kind of left to their to their own devices to kind of figure out, how am I going to manage this workload? They weren't really given any resources, or even as Lucy said, the boundaries or the respect of those boundaries. So it was up to the individual to manage that workload.
Absolutely. And when it comes to defining the workload, HR is one of those functions where there's a very limited control on that, because we have our work, but then it's also a function which is constantly interacting with business and people, right? So we have to respond to that. And most of the time, the plan that we create for ourselves in the morning goes for a task within the next few seconds, right? As requests keep coming in, right? So I think when it comes to the time, we have to really look at it from a perspective of a very critical resource, which is also very scarce, right? And we have to really prioritize everything that comes to us. Including our own boundary condition, we have to look at what is important from a business perspective and maybe club these two to make sure that we are delivering the best that is needed in every second.
I would invite everybody to spend a few minutes discussing the skills behind time mastery. So before we go into advanced techniques, which is in the title of the panel, Lucy, you started mentioning skills. So that pretty much brought this question onto the panel. What are some of the skills underpinning time mastery? And you all heard me say this before, there are special points available for skills that are outside of the circle of the usual suspects. So some skills that we wouldn't necessarily automatically associate with time mastery. So Lucy, please lead us for this one.
Okay, so skills. So we're looking at listing skills currently, and then are we going to go into specific ones later, or do you want me to go into them as I talk?
Whatever feels more comfortable. We can talk about skills and detail them as we go.
Okay, so when I think about setting up our time, I'd say there are, and I'm just going to go with some of the basics and then work up. Saying no is a really big one. So this is kind of around setting boundaries, but being able to say no and find ways that feel very comfortable to you in saying no. And if people are interested, I can give some examples of how to say no. Secondly is being able to reset expectations. And I think that is also goes outside a little bit of the kind of common things that we talk about, like time blocking and stuff like that. And being able to reset expectations, I found to be massively helpful with folks that I've worked with, because often as HR professionals, we say yes to a lot of things. We want to be helpful with there is a sort of, people see us as a service function often. And really that means that we get a lot on our plate. And if you are a team of one or a team of two, and there are very few people to delegate to, being able to reset expectations that you kind of wish you hadn't said yes to is very important. Thirdly, I think making sure, sort of getting to the next level of calendar blocking. Calendar blocking is great, but unless you have some rules around those and you're very specific with them, and you set expectations with your team and people around why those blocks are in place, it is very easy to either ignore them yourself or for people to just block over them and blindly ignore them. And then they just become guilt-inducing, moments in your day where you haven't in fact stuck to them at all. And then I think there's sort of setting personal boundaries as well. And personal boundaries are things which are important to you, like when you might go pick your kids up, that kind of thing, so that you have some flexibility around your work schedule where that is at all possible. And I know that for some of you, that isn't as easy as for others. But thinking about where your personal boundaries are and making sure for those of you who are managers that you do talk about those with your team so that they also understand that that is an expectation that they can set as well. Anyway, I'll stop there for a sec. I have one or two more, but I'll pass it over to my fellow panelists.
Thank you. Let's go Sudhir and then Dave, if that's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say like prioritization is a very important skill, and to be able to prioritize, there are other skills that are required, right? Your ability to understand business and its requirements, your ability to understand what are the people needs, and also the resources that you have at hand. And while prioritizing, right, balancing the firmness and fluidity, right? So when Lucy talked about the calendar blocks, yes, it could lead to a lot of guilt if you are just, passing over them. But you also need a bit of fluidity, right? So you just can't say, okay, these are my calendar blocks and this is what I must stick to. So balancing that, how firm I need to be and how fluid I need to be, I think that gives energy, to Dave's point earlier, like when it comes to energy, your ability to maintain that balance is critical. And negotiation skills is critical for HR people, I would say, from multiple perspectives. And when it comes to managing time, negotiating becomes a big thing out there.
I would. You're right. There's the kind of the street smart things such as the to-do lists and how you schedule and all that. I think I would start some of the skills that people should have is kind of at the 30,000 foot level, like self-awareness, like understanding how you actually do work. And that may take some time for somebody depending on what type of job they're in and the length of employment, but understanding how you work, when you work best, when you don't work best, even backing up to the night before, what do you need to do to get ready for your workday so the morning isn't a train wreck and a disaster? Being in control, understanding that you have to take control of your calendar, your to-do list, the way you work, how you schedule things. A lot of people, I think, are just constantly in response mode, and they respond to things, and then they get to the end of the week and they have no idea what they did for work. And I think a big one is clarity. We always need to seek clarity, whether it's our actual job responsibilities all the way down to the projects and tasks, because a lack of clarity is a brick wall for many people, especially somebody with a different brain, which lack of clarity can also lead to procrastination, which can be debilitating for some people. So, and I would just add one quick thing, and we may touch on it, but people also need to understand the difference between procrastination and strategic delay, because there is a big difference between there's more misinformation out there. I've seen people say schedule procrastination. That's super bad advice. Can you strategically delay something because it doesn't have to be done this second, versus procrastinating on something that's due by the end of the day? So those are the types of 30,000 foot level things that I would do. Then you can get in, I think, to the nitty gritty of what kind of to-do list do I need and time blocking and where can I achieve the most flow.
I love it. I mean, everyone's mentioned so many great things here, and I mean the mix of self-awareness, the mix of techniques, the mix of strategy. When it comes to time, what it comes down to now. I'm going to introduce the 5 P's. I told you I would. Proper preparation prevents poor performance, and what it comes down to is making sure that you take a mix of everything that we're saying, and prepare yourself on, one, how to respond when delegating, or saying no. Two, how to make sure you're setting yourself up for success with putting yourself in the optimal work environment, like David said. Three, Sudhir said prioritization, making sure that you're able to prioritize your work and work within the proper quadrant your work, as to whether it's important and urgent or not important and not urgent, to understand what is wasteful time, what is wasteful work, what is important work. So again, prepare yourself on how to learn understanding these techniques that we're talking about today, so that way you can set yourself to be what we're talking about, a time master, should I say.
Thank you. Now, Lucy, you teased us with a couple of additional skills. Would you like to share them now and close the loop on this topic?
Okay. So you mentioned, I think most folks mentioned them, but there's one which I noticed the most happening whenever I coach somebody on time mastery. And I wonder if David in his work has sort of found something similar. But you mentioned self-awareness, and what I've usually found with people who are obviously high functioning individuals at companies, bright, and they're like, I cannot manage my time. And I don't know what goes wrong. And often it's not just that it's not a lack of understanding of how to like use your calendar appropriately. It's not an inability to organize themselves properly. It's actually a head thing. And they often have a competing commitment that is stopping themselves being able to do the things that they know they should be doing. For example, I was working with somebody who was in a very senior management position, and we looked at a breakdown of his time. And he was, I don't know where my time goes. I don't have enough of it. And I'm really stressed by the end of the day. And we found that he was helping the sales team a lot with help tickets for things. And he'd got sort of stuck into doing it a little bit. And then it had kind of snowballed somewhat. And when we really dug into it, we realized that he couldn't say no to that part because he had a really deep-seated belief that if I don't help people, they will think poorly of me. If I don't help somebody, I'm a bad person. And often, to this self-awareness point, we have these beliefs that we really hold on to, which we don't realize massively impact how we think about our time and how we use our time and what we do say yes to, and the expectations that we set for ourselves and others. And they're deeply impacted by those sort of somewhat self-limiting beliefs sometimes that we have. And often this is sort of the root of procrastination as well. It's not that you can't get the thing done. Obviously you can get it done. Obviously there's some other things that could come into that. But a lot of the time it's because there's another competing commitment that's stopping you getting over the hump on that. And helping people reflect on that is can be very, very powerful actually, to help them work out, well, what is it that I say to myself? What is that baseline of commitment that I have as a belief about myself, which really stops me making progress on some of these things, these high impact things for the business, which I should be spending more time doing.
Yeah, if I don't mind jumping in real quick, I think Lucy brings out a great point. It's goes back to what I mentioned earlier, is that everyone's given a certain amount of time every day. We all have the same amount of time, but existentially, do they feel that they're happy with how they've spent their time? Do they feel self-rewarded that, like Lucy just said, that individual feels like the most important, he feels most satisfied with his use of time with doing that one function, which might not be the most important function, but it's self-gratification that his time that he's spending on earth, or within that day, or within that week, within that hour, is most rewarding to him. On how it's being spent. So again, I think that takes into account a lot about the human psyche of whether or not your time is being spent doing the things that you really want to do within your job, within your your day, every single day. So sorry, Sudhir, I think I cut you off.
Sudhir, yes.
You did actually. You brought in a very wonderful point. Thank you so much for that. And while Minola asked Lucy to close it, but this is such an important thing, I cannot but jump in. So Dave and Lucy both talked about self-awareness, and Jason brought some interesting points out there. And I think we need to just decipher that entire thing of self-awareness a little more here, So there are a few things that come to my mind when I think of self-awareness, particularly from a time management perspective. So one is clarity, right? So having clarity on what needs to be done and what needs to be achieved, right? Second is motivation, right? What is my motivation behind this, and how motivated do I feel to do this thing, right? Answering that right at the start will help big time. So if I'm not feeling motivated about it, then sorting it out early on might make sense. Third is the resources, right? Do I have the resources to complete this task or whatever I'm doing? Or most times what happens, which leads to procrastination, is we jump into it and then we realize we don't have the stuff, we don't have the information and so on. And then we just lose a lot of time fretting about those things, not doing anything. We get a kind of a freeze, So these are three very important things, if we can bring in that level of self-awareness at these three planes, I think that will help us move fast.
I would also bring in goal setting into that. I think, setting up, good goals for yourself, so that way you can both reward yourself with time, so again, spending time achieving this small goal and then rewarding yourself with downtime So again, it goes back to kind of like batching and time, a little bit of time blocking. But again, I think, that you have to reward yourself from that point of, okay, I did spend my time in a productive way. It goes back again to that psyche standpoint, that it might not be the thing that I necessarily wanted to spend my time doing, but I'm going to reward myself because I achieved that, and I stuck to that. So again, setting very reasonable goals, time specific, reasonable goals throughout your day or throughout your week, throughout your month, to make those achievements, and then rewarding yourself for those accomplishments.
Mm.
And I would just add, Lucy alluded to it a little bit, but I think, and I see this in a lot of people I work with, where just the to-do list ends up just being a fire hose, and they sit down at their desk and they don't know what to start on, and they spend countless hours just trying to decide what to actually start on. So it's getting into the trenches and developing those systems. I remember I interviewed a very well-known entrepreneur who's at a national franchise business now, and he always told me that before he leaves his desk at night, he does a top 3. It doesn't matter if it's on his computer screen or it's a post-it in front of his keyboard. It doesn't care what the technique is, but he knows exactly what he's going to do the next day when he sits at his desk. And that eases your stress at night. It helps you sleep a little easier, and you have a game plan when you get to the office the next day. The worst thing we can do is just sit down at our desk and go, okay, what am I going to work on? Because for many people, it ends up being nothing. And then that just spirals out of control. And then the guilt comes in, because now you're procrastinating, now you're delaying, you're missing deadlines. And as was mentioned here, there's a little bit of guilt involved, because now you're crawling back to somebody because you need that clarity, because you might actually feel stupid that you didn't get the mission right,
Mm-hmm. Well, believe it or not, we are right in the middle of our conversation, and this is the moment where I will make a confession. It makes me so happy when my role as the moderator becomes irrelevant, because that means that the conversation grows into its own life. So thank you, and that's the whole idea. Just carry the topic forward. I made a mental post-it with how individual time mastery is. However, I cannot help but wonder, what are some of the organizational prerequisites for a great individual time mastery? Because I can imagine some organizational cultures that do come with some nuances around saying no, that do come with some nuances around the ways in which people interact and work with each other. So let's just take a few minutes and look at what are the organizational prerequisites, or what does an organization have to ensure for the individuals within the workplace to become time masters. And Sudhir, I would ask you to lead us into this.
Yeah, I already unmuted myself, before you asked. So I was so ready to jump in. I think, a lot of organizations spend most of their time talking about the financial resources in the organization. Like, this is our budget, this is how we spend, profitability, and so on, right? If there is a similar amount of attention and focus to time as a resource in the organization and similar kind of discussions around it, I think that is one thing which can really help people focus on time and its management, right? The second is from a cultural perspective, like there could be organizations which are very hierarchical in nature. And in those, saying no becomes difficult depending on where it's coming from, right? So, making it a little more open, saying, okay, structurally we could be hierarchical, but when it comes to culture, it is something where people have the ability to define their own objectives and the way they would want to move with those objectives, right? So saying no and negotiating for the outcomes is part of the thing. So these two things, like talk about time and make it a culture where negotiation is an accepted thing.
Go on, Dave, if you got something.
No, I was just going to say I'm not equipped to, I guess, talk about the organization. What I would say is what the individual would want is, I think, what the organization needs to listen to and allow them to manage their time, and things such as scheduling meetings that make sense, not keeping people in meetings all day and then expecting the same workload to be done as well. But I think it's important to look at the types of jobs, the positions, and then see what the people actually, how they can manage, and ask for that feedback. So I understand, culture and all that are significant as well. But, for example, are there days where there's no meetings at all, or no commitments, where somebody can essentially have a day with no meetings and get a lot of runway to get a lot of stuff done, those types of things. But that's what I would say is, how are the individuals responding to your time management philosophy?
Having spent a couple of years in corporations, I'd like to opine here. I think that there needs to be frequent check-ins, right? So an employee, needs to be able to, they should be having check-ins with their manager, typically weekly. And part of that should be discussion of workload. What are their accomplishments for the week? What are their goals for the week, for the next week that they're setting out to accomplish? And that should foster the discussion of, whether or not they're spending their time in accordance to what the organization expects and their manager expects. And then it also sets up the environment, to much Dave mentioned, is where they feel free and comfortable to say, I'm drowning, or I'm having a hard time getting things done because there's too much on my plate, or I need help managing my time. So we have to have an organization that is, again, we'll go back to the word culture, that culturally is allowing for this free flow of information. So again, I'll also bring up a couple things that it doesn't have to be exclusive to that person's manager. It could be someone that, in an environment where they have teammates and peers, where they have one shared approach to working with each other towards a goal, and they can be going to their peers and saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with my managing my time." So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's in a supervisory capacity that you're going to help with, or an HR capacity. It could be a peer. How are you managing your time? Each day, or what are some of the goals that you're setting out for yourself? So, it doesn't, you can reach out to the people. And the other thing I'll just mention, one of my management philosophies I always work with is work smart, not hard, right? Think of ways to streamline your work to be more efficient. So that way you can get more done within a day. Everyone's bringing up AI right now, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a threat to some, but it's a wonderful thing for others. How can you utilize tools that are out there in order to do your work in a more smarter approach? How can you use systems? Okay, there's many different softwares out there. Jira softwares for product managers, Monday.com, ClickUp.com. There's all these other tools that are out there in order to help you manage your time, manage projects, manage workflows. Lean management techniques that are out there that people can be utilizing from a project-based perspective, but also from a workflow and personal individual time management perspective. So again, lots of things that are out there, but you got to have the intestinal fortitude, as I would say, to go and ask, go talk to people, go seek that help. All right. And do a little research yourself. Okay. Google's a wonderful thing. Just google.com, go there and do, and same thing with YouTube. So hopefully that helps.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in all of those things, so I'll keep it brief. I think those are all great points. I think in terms of understanding what the company can do to really ensure that it's set up for individual time management, I think it's super simple. The real basics: clear goals, super clear expectations, team meetings where you talk about how you're going to really operationalize your time well, what that needs to look like within your teams. And then as Jason said, these tools, whether it is Slack or Asana or any of these things, have been are wonderful. I think also a lot of folks in the comments are talking about AI, and that's an interesting thing to touch on as well, to see how we can use AI to take care of some things which used to be very laborious in our jobs, which are now made a lot quicker, especially comms to the companies and all kinds of things that you can get a lot of help with really, really fast. And I think it's a nice exercise. A lot of the teams that we're working with are looking at how actually, I've just come back from HR Transform in Vegas, and there was a lot of discussions around how HR professionals can use AI in order to take the workload off and really help operationalize some of that time.
I would just add this real quick, only because I wrote a book about burnout, and I've interviewed many people who have basically crashed and burned, that the more you ignore time management, whether at the organizational level or the individual level, the more you're going to see burnout. Because it was abundantly clear to me, and I went through burnout, that's why I wrote the book, is that I could always do better with managing my time, depending on whether it was personal commitments, family commitments, or workload. We think of just workload when we talk about burnout, but allowing somebody to construct their schedule in their to-do list and blocking out days and blocking out times and knowing what to do with it is directly related to burnout if it's not addressed properly. So.
Yeah, one thing we haven't really touched on too much here is work-life balance, right? So, because we're talking mostly about within a work environment, but there's today's point, there's also the personal aspect, and you have to be able to structure your day such that there is that balance between work obligations and familiar obligations, because most people have those familiar obligations as well, and they see them as more important than their work. However, their work is what pays for the bills that allow the family stuff to happen. So it's of extreme importance, and again, it leads to burnout, to David's point, unless you have some structure in your life to balance both of them.
Yeah, and real quick, this could be a whole nother hour conversation, but when you've got employees that are also caregivers, whether they're having aging parents or maybe children that that have challenges or disabilities or what have you, some of those people could already be tired before they even get to the office. So that's why it's an energy management issue as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for making that point about burnout, Dave. Very important aspect. And it's also actually a good way to figure out, like, if there is an issue with time management, right? So I'll just take an example here, like, vehicle in motion, right? So there is a normal wear and tear, right? So if you're driving a car, it will happen. But it's when it's going through some kind of a friction or some kind of an issue, that is where the burnout starts happening, right? That is where the brakes or the tires start burning out, or the engine, right? And same is true for an individual. A wear and tear is a part of the process which we can kind of take a break and rejuvenate ourselves. But burnouts happen when there's a huge resistance. We are made to do something that we don't like, or we have too much to do in too short time, and so on. So, like, identifying those issues and where the resistance is coming from, I think that is a very meaningful activity. And as Jason was saying earlier, must be done on a regular basis, right? So it's not that, when you have crossed that point, then you get into that discussion, right? It is on an ongoing basis that you do a check-in and figure out, where are you as of now? Is it normal wear and tear, or is it already getting into that burnout zone?
And what an amazing segue into my next question. I would ask each of you to share at least one technique that you have found is your ally when it comes to time mastery. And Lucy, I will ask you to start us off, and then we will go from there. One technique.
Ooh, that is a tricky one. Okay. My favorite technique for time management, which I do every quarter, I do a lot with clients, my co-founder and I do together as well, is we do audits of our time. And you can put all these tools together, but sometimes it's very easy to fall into these little habits of which actually don't serve us very well when it comes to time management. And so I would encourage everybody, if you haven't done this already, to find a buddy at work. It can be outside of work. You could do it with your spouse as well if you like, but find somebody at work that is a friend of yours and schedule an hour and then spend 30 minutes each doing a time audit for yourself, and draw a wheel, segment it out, put in how you spend your time, roughly what percentage of your time falls into each of those segments. And that's your current state. Then think about, what is my ideal use of time? What would I prefer? How do I really need to use my time if I think about what is high impact for the business, or the kind of like high important tasks that I need to do? And then write out, what does the realistically ideal spread actually look like? And you can write those percentages around the outside of your wheel if you like, and that gives you the delta between the two. And you may find that you're even missing a segment on strategic thinking time or whatever it might look like, but you can start to see where you have the biggest gaps. And then the question is, well, what do I need to do to close those gaps in each of those segments where there's a big delta? And that could be super useful, because it means that we start finding actionable things that you can do which are going to help. And it may be that you need to reset expectations. It may be that you need to go back and say no to something. It may be that you need to be very, very specific about a calendar block which must go in there and stay sacrosanct. It may be that your whole team needs a bit of a redo when it comes to operationalizing time management well within your team. Anyway, so that would be my one main tip that I would say to do if you haven't done already, is do a little time audit to see where your time's going and where it should be going instead, and then how you can close that delta.
Great technique. Sudhir.
Yeah, so I would reiterate what I had said earlier in a different context, though. Whenever we start doing something, getting into a task or jumping into something, let's look at three things. First, clarity. Am I clear in terms of what needs to be achieved, right? Who needs it? Who is my customer? And what is the end outcome that will satisfy them, right? So having that clarity is important. Second is motivation, right? Am I motivated enough to do this, right? Am I excited enough to do this? And what Dave said earlier, the energy part, that's also part of motivation. Do I have enough energy right now to complete it, right? The third thing is resources. Do I have everything that is needed to fulfill this task or complete this job? Right. So it could be information, it could be apparatus, it could be other resources, people, team, guidance from certain people, or whatever it is, right? So do I really have everything or skills to complete this task? If we really start every job, every task, answering these three questions, we'll be able to determine the constraints ahead of time, seek help in time, and get everything that is required to fulfill that job.
I think, Lucy, you kind of said it, that, a time audit. I would say that, some people think they're going to, oh, here's my time management program and it's going to work for the next 2 years. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, I'm constantly analyzing how I structure my schedule week to week, and seeing how I can make it better. One of the things that became very effective to me a few years back was I belonged to this networking group, and it was 45 minutes from the house. It was early in the morning, and then afterwards maybe you'd go do like a one-on-one, or like a smaller meeting, cup of coffee. So I found myself getting back to the house around 11 or 12 noon, and then I'd sit at my desk and I couldn't get any work done. So I started creating what I would call a theme day. So I try and do very similar tasks for the entire day, because task switching for me is near impossible. So I couldn't go to a networking meeting and do marketing and then go ahead and write an article or something like that. It would have taken me all day and all night. So, and just large chunks of time. So I put individual clients into only a few days, and then I leave the other days completely free. And those are my theme days, so to speak. It allows you to get in the flow, and the gears get kind of really humming.
Yeah, to Dave's point a little bit, and something that I do is I make sure I win the day early. right? You set yourself up for success, both mentally and physically. I wake up early. I try, every day to wake up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. And because I want to get up, I want to get accomplished. I want to make sure I get a workout in, and I feel like I win. I'm starting out the day healthy, both mentally and physically, and I'm setting myself up for success early. I have a list of things to do that I want to achieve and accomplish. Okay, and then I can quadrant my work. Okay, from an auditing perspective, if I've done that in the past. I don't do it every day, but I can sample size a quadrant of my work. Quadrant my work into through using the Eisenhower matrix, what quadrant each work is and how I'm spending my time. But really, the result of where I've tracked my work is my email inbox. Am I able to keep my email inbox to a reasonably manageable amount that are pending? Okay. And that's how I see that I'm managing, my workflow properly at the end. But it really but you're not sure when you're spending your work without doing that quadrating audit, like Lucy was saying. So there has to be some sort of auditing. But again, setting yourself up both mentally and physically at the beginning of every day is something that I cherish, and that's, I think, is really important for everybody, because if you're behind at the beginning, you're going to be lost all throughout, whether on that day or that week. So, and then you're going to get further and further behind.
I would agree. The way you start your day is the way you're going to finish it.
Sudhir.
Yeah, like what Jason was saying reminded me of my first appraisal, many, many, many decades ago. So like I got a feedback that I am not great at planning skills, right? And I got very upset with that feedback. So I went to my second level manager and said, my boss just told me I am not good at planning. And I don't agree. I complete everything on time, right? I have never missed any deadline. So how come my boss tells me I'm not good at planning? And he's looked at me and I said, hey, maybe you're too good at crisis management. So you don't let it slip eventually. But you need to think whether it's your planning which is making you successful, or is it your crisis management? In either case, you will end up doing the task. Your style is different. So to Jason's point, I would say, and Dave said it earlier, self-awareness. That's important, right? So for Jason, it's good to start early. And Lucy was doing, when he said, like, I wake up at 4:30, like for somebody else, waking up at 9 o'clock might work better. So understanding what works for you, what is your style, are you a planner, are you a crisis manager, and not just going with the best practices or following the role models and so on. Look at yourself and see what works for you.
Well, it's very, very painful to say that we are about 8 minutes away from wrapping this wonderful conversation up. And I was thinking how to word this question. I guess most people would ask, on your journey to time mastery, what was your biggest learning? But I'm a change practitioner. I love disruption and doing things differently. So I will ask all of you, what is the biggest thing that you unlearned as you tried to become better and better at time mastery? And I will give you a few seconds to think about it. I will just thank everybody in the audience for being here. And before we will start getting those conversations, I just want to tell everybody that this conversation is being recorded. And you can always go back and re-listen or recommend it either through our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io. So the biggest unlearning that you had to go through on your journey towards time mastery. And I will leave that question there and let's see where inspiration strikes. Sudhir.
Yeah, the biggest unlearning for me was that I must complete everything that I start as per the plan. And that really caused a lot of stress for me to start with. And now, if things are not working, I just drop them. I say, hey, I'll come back to them. Let me do something else. So not getting stuck with that initial commitment and being fluid as I go through it. I think that was a big change that really helped me manage my time very well.
Thank you. Dave.
When I wrote the book on burnout, there was a section on time management, and one section was called the stop, drop, and roll. And that's one thing that I had to unlearn, and I think many people have had to do that, where They just drop what they're doing every time somebody comes over to the desk or the cubicle or calls them or emails them. And it takes some discipline and some practice. But if we're going to preserve our time and our energy, we're going to have to eliminate the stop, drop, and roll every time somebody wants our attention.
You want to go, Lucy, or you want me to go?
Go ahead. Go, Jason.
No, Jason, and then
I'll let you
Lucy.
wrap it up. So listening skills. Actually, I used to want to try and be the 60-second manager and come up with an answer right away, and give that response. The more I can tackle them, the better use of my time I'm taking. But actually, I've learned to listen, and then I could be more effective in how I answer things, and also lets me prioritize better. But listening skills has played a huge part in my effectiveness as a people leader and in my productivity. So now, Lucy, you can take it home.
Better be a good point. Actually, do you know what? Zara in the comments has said exactly what I was going to say, which I love. They've said, I unlearned that I need to do everything myself and embrace delegation to virtual assistants. So mine is not towards virtual assistants, but I really did have to unlearn that I had to do everything myself. I was so used to working on my own, having my own business. And my co-founder has dragged me kicking and screaming into the delegation world. So thank you to her. So I did have to unlearn that. I was so used to just having to do it myself. And it's better when it's shared. It's better when you work together as a team, even if those people don't directly are in your HR department. Asking for help and is something which I have not been that great at doing in my career. So anyway, I'm with you there, Zara. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly.
Now we are for 3-4 minutes out, and I'm wondering if we can summarize what successful time mastery looks like or feels like in one word, and then with a little explanation. So successful time mastery feels like or looks like one word and a short explanation. And let's do this counterclockwise from how we started. And that means Sudhir will go first, and then Jason, Dave, and Lucy. It looks like you're our wrap-upper of the day. So
taking it home again.
Time mastery, success, one word, and short explanation. Sudhir.
Yeah, I'll pick a very philosophical word here, peaceful, So at the end of it, you can achieve a lot if you are in a peaceful state of mind. And anything that is causing anxiety is going to take away a lot in terms of energy, in terms of accuracy, in terms of everything, right? So time management, if it's leading to your being peaceful, having a peaceful state of mind, then you are doing it well, right? If there's any anxiety that is coming in, you need to check.
Thank you. I knew this was going to be the mic drop round. Jason.
My word that I was thinking of is very similar to Sahir's. It's satisfaction, right? Are you satisfied in how you've spent your time throughout that day? Are you satisfied in what you've accomplished? Are you satisfied in, again, in your being mentally and physically from that standpoint? So satisfaction of oneself.
Dave.
I would say clarity, and I know we've talked about this, but it's clarity from the individual task. It's clarity about deadlines and milestones and benchmarks. It's clarity about what the expectations of you are from leadership, clarity of your entire role, and clarity that you actually have methodically assembled a week that's going to flow in your favor. So.
Nice. Well, yes. Every time each person went, I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to say the next. And then the next person said the word I was going to say. So I think I'll finish on happiness. And that is from Teresa Amabile, who is a Harvard Business School professor, wrote a book called The Progress Principle. And there's been a lot of research that has been done across the board on what makes people happy at work. And really fundamentally, it boils down to this. Have you just been making progress every day and feeling good about that progress? And these small wins really add up. And so I would say, if you're feeling like you'll feel happiest at work when you feel like you are making progress, you've got that clarity, you feel a lot of satisfaction, and you have that sense of calm as well, all of which kind of wraps in nicely to that overall sense of happiness and well-being, I think.
Mm-hmm. Lucy, Dave, Jason, and Sudhir, it was a joy, it was a privilege having this front row seat in this conversation. And thank you so very much for managing your time to accommodate being here today. And the same wholehearted thanks to everybody in the audience. And tomorrow, still part of our March series, do make sure that you jump in and you listen. You're in for a treat on resilient team building. Thank you so much, Jessa, for taking such good care of us again. And I hope I will get the joy to welcome as many of you as possible in future conversations. Have a time-efficient week and rest of the month and rest of the year. And take care, everyone. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you, Manolo.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
See you all.
Ciao.